I think a lot of younger adults are quite concerned. So if you look at the spring 2025 Harvard Youth Public Opinion poll, it gives a really good sense of what sort of trust that young people have in institutions. And it's
Hmm.
basically no trust at all, right? And so
Not a
when you
surprise.
yeah, and then when you translate that out to like financial metrics or investing or speculating perhaps, you really do see that trust begin to show up in the behaviors, right? So like gambling
Hmm.
on meme coins, gambling on meme stocks, sports gambling itself.
Welcome to Thoughtful Money. I'm its founder and your host, Adam Taggart. I spent a lot of time on this channel talking with seasoned investors with decades of experience, the vast majority of whom are older than I, oftentimes by several decades. But I'm no spring chicken. And I find myself more and more wondering how younger generations look at the world of finance and the economy, especially with the daunting challenges they face. Inflation and the high cost of living, extreme wealth inequality, record high housing unaffordability, AI's threat of mass jobs destruction, 37 trillion in national debt and growing. How are they feeling about stepping into the financial world that they're inheriting? Is our education system teaching them financial literacy any better than the total failure it had with us? And where are they getting their financial information from? To find out, we've got the pleasure of speaking today with author, economic commentator, and educator Kyla Scanlon, one of the top Zillennial financial influencers. She's widely followed across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, and Substack. Kyla, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, it is such a treat. I have been really looking forward to this. I very much appreciate the fact that you came on the program here, Kyla. I wasn't sure you wanted to come on an old guy's platform here, since you've got such a big one yourself. But I'm very impressed with what you're doing, what you've been able to do at such a young age, and the fact that you are finding a way to engage younger generations on these financial topics that I and a lot of my peers talk about. We have a hard time tapping into that younger generation, and obviously, I've got a lot of white in my beard. I don't think I'm the kind of guy that a lot of younger folks relate to, and it's a topic that a lot of people don't really get engaged on until they have wealth to be
Mhm.
concerned about. But somehow you've been able to kind of crack that code for the younger generation, and that's where this information is most needed. So first, before we dive into this, again, I want to praise you for what you've been able to do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Well, all right. Well, look, maybe we can even talk a little shop, and you can share with me, some of what you've learned along here.
Sure.
But I do want to get a sense too from, your financial viewpoint, how you're seeing the economy and the markets and whatnot. But if we can, let's start with that question that I asked right there in the intro. How do today's younger adults feel about the world they're inheriting, financially speaking?
I think a lot of younger adults are quite concerned. So if you look at the spring 2025 Harvard Youth Public Opinion poll, it gives a really good sense of what sort of trust that young people have in institutions. And it's
Hmm.
basically no trust at all, right? And so
Not a
when you
surprise.
yeah, and then when you translate that out to like financial metrics or investing or speculating perhaps, you really do see that trust begin to show up in the behaviors, right? So like gambling on
Hmm.
meme coins, gambling on meme stocks, sports gambling itself. And so I think a lot of people are aware of the power of the stock market that's been instilled in a lot of young people from a young age, the power of compound interest. But instead of maybe, buying the S&P and letting that do the work over the next 40 years, they're taking these alternative routes that are bigger bets on bigger things and trying to make money that way. So there's this element of financial nihilism that was coined by the New York Times a few years ago. And I think that's what we really do see in financial lives for young people.
All right, that's a great term, financial nihilism. So there's a number of things you mentioned there I want to dig into here. So I have said many times, and I believe what you said is a validation of this, but correct me if not, is that today's younger generation is looking at, okay, what do I need to do to have the kind of lifestyle my parents had, right? If I just want to have sort of the traditional American dream, middle class lifestyle, they're looking at that and saying, I don't think I'm going to get there. At least I'm not going to get there by sort of the traditional route of just, hey, work hard and save, and over time you're going to be able to afford a house and get there. I'm looking at houses, I'm looking at other things I need to afford here, the cost of having kids. That just doesn't seem realistic to me. The only way I'm going to get there, and the only way I'm going to catch that brass ring is if I get a rocket ride, is if I buy the right meme stock or meme coin or whatever. So they've taken on much more of a speculative perspective than in a traditional investing perspective, or to use your word, gambling, right? So they seem to be, from my perspective, making one of two decisions. Either I'm going to gamble and just hope, it comes up black for me and I end up doing okay. Or to this question of or point of financial nihilism, they're just like checking out. Like, hey, I'm not going to care that much about money. And we hear a lot about Gen Z in the workplace that they value work-life balance much more. They don't want to work as hard as previous generations, but they're happy to make the trade-off. All right, I'll make less money, right? I'm going to do van life or whatever, right? So is my description here fairly accurate of the mindset?
Yeah, so a lot of my research has been over the last year, and I've been on book tour for the last year with my book in this economy. And so I've been on a lot of college campuses, I've been at a lot of conferences, and have had the opportunity to speak to a lot of young people. And what I see that I think supports what you're talking about is sort of this barbell approach. So you see young people, yeah, going after like that meme coin or the sports gambling aspect, very risk on, thinking that that's the path out. There's an element of checking out, or they're trying to like just secure a home one day. And then
Hmm.
there's people who are going a completely different route and like going back to trade school. So the Wall Street Journal had an article, Gen Z is the tool belt generation. And so in my conversation with a lot of young people over the last year, I heard from them that they were like, I don't think college is right for me. I'm just going to go get trained to be a plumber, which is a very important path and one that makes a lot of sense right now. And so I think you see that barbell strategy where some people are taking the quote unquote more risk averse path, and then others are, yeah, gambling on meme coins because a lot of the financial aspects of the latter are completely out of reach. So homes are extraordinarily expensive in most places. Childcare costs are through the roof. And so it's much more difficult to build the foundation of an economic life than it used to be. And so people are exploring all sorts of options.
I'm actually really glad to hear about the trade school part there, for a variety of reasons. And one, I totally understand why. And first off, I mean, we have a huge dearth of unfilled trade jobs. I mean, we really need the people to work those jobs, and that's only going to get worse because a lot of the people that work in the trades are quite old. They're beginning to age out. Right. So just to kind of build the world of tomorrow, we need much more skilled tradesmen than we have here. And Kyle, I went to expensive Ivy League institutions for undergrad and grad school, and you'll be hard pressed to find somebody who is more critical of the higher education system than me in terms of the ROI that it delivers to the average student. I'm not saying don't go to a good school, but I'm saying that college has really morphed into a degree factory, and the cost of the degree has skyrocketed. And I'm sure you've seen the charts I have that basically more than almost any other service in the country, inflation in college education has outstripped almost everything else, while at the same time, the quality of the education, the quality of many of the degrees that are conferred has gone down. So for a lot of kids, they're told at a young age, oh, you got to go get a college degree. They go get it, and they come out and they realize, oh my gosh, I'm not really trained to do much, and nobody really wants to hire me for this degree. So the ROI of that has been, I think, deteriorating. I think to the point where I think it's probably gotten to the point where it's negative for the average college graduate. Now, you don't have to agree with that or not, but I think it's consistent with some of what you're talking about there. Now, in parallel, the trades have been very underinvested in, and the data sets out there long enough now where I know people my age who went to trade schools who are doing better on average than many kids that went and got an education, right? And I think your generation is finally kind of waking up to that to say, hey, there may be a better path to do this. I don't have to become a student loan debt serf. I can actually, get started pretty early on, not take on debt, and actually have a pretty darn good lifestyle and be working at a job that fulfills me. So I'm actually glad to see that that's beginning to build momentum. One of my dream interviews here on this channel is Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, and he has done
He's
an
great.
awful lot to try to highlight this need for for sort of stopping demonizing the trades, like, oh, you don't want to go to a trade school, right? That's a blue collar job, right? You want a white collar job. But also talking about the great lack of talent that we have there now. So I think we're gonna need a lot more people in those trades, and I hope nothing but tailwinds continue to push your generation into there as it makes sense for them, obviously.
Yeah, I think Mike might even have a scholarship program for
It
trades.
does. It's the Micro
Yeah,
Works Foundation, and so
yeah.
he's basically paying people to go into these internships.
Yeah. And then in terms of the return on investment in a college education, we're actually getting data, the college wage premium, so the amount of money that you would make relative to somebody who didn't get a college degree, that's really eroded over the past couple of years, especially
Hmm.
post-pandemic. So Guy Berger, who used to be at the Burning Glass Institute, covers this really well in his research, just talking about like, people are going to college and they have these grand ambitions and you have all this debt, and then you graduate and it's really difficult to get a job that's going to support that debt that you have and will help you get through after you've spent all this money. And so that's, I think, a data point that the higher education system is really going to have to reckon with. I think they're pretty aware that things aren't working like how they used to, especially
Hmm.
because a lot of entry level jobs are now getting increasingly outsourced to AI. And so you have students who are graduating and can't even find a job from some of
Right.
these really top institutions. Like I saw a data point, and it's still, quite recent after graduation, but I think it's like a quarter of Harvard 2025 grads don't have a job yet, and these are like the best and the brightest. Um, so there's a lot of stuff that points to people just trying something else, like that path of predictable progress that you would graduate college and there'd be a high return on that investment, and then you'd find a house and you would stay in that house for a long time and you'd move up the career ladder. It just doesn't work like how it used to for young people.
Yeah, and that's I don't want to make this a super depressing conversation. I think there is some optimism in there, and trades is one part of that. But yeah, so I mentioned this in the intro, right? I mean, we are at kind of record levels of unaffordability, on key metrics like price of a house versus average income or median income, right? So it just legitimately is harder for kids to get ahead today than it was in previous generations. And look, there were always boom bust cycles to the economy. So I graduated undergrad coming out of a recession, and it was tough. I mean, it was rough. You
Sure.
had to really work hard to get a job. Jobs weren't easy to get. But as the economy recovered, then the economy recovered and jobs became more plentiful. I think there's something different going on this time, particularly with AI. But you also mentioned outsourcing, and I mean, there's other things that we've been doing over the past several decades to what I say is sort of start to erode the bottom rungs of the career ladder. Right, you get these entry level jobs, and then that would be your on ramp to a professional career, and you'd eventually work your way up over time. But increasingly through initially outsourcing, but now automation, robotics, AI, whatever, we're just removing those rungs where they're not going to come back. And the question becomes, well, how are today's kids, whether they're, we'll call them high school graduates, regardless whether they're going to college or not, how are they going to get that initial job experience to progress up in the world? I'm not sure DoorDash is going to provide that role. And to be honest, once the robo taxis take
Yeah,
over the
Waymo.
DoorDash delivery, it's the kids aren't even going to have those jobs anymore.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. And that's like kind of the problem with how trust ties into all of this is we don't really have an answer for the jobs that are getting outsourced, and we never really do. Like, there's a paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research that talks about how nails, so like hammer and nails, like nails used to be 0.5% of GDP or something like back in the
Hmm.
1800s. And so it's a sign that technological progress is always going to distort the economy and change it. So nails are no longer 0.5% of GDP. And we never have really had an answer for people like the Luddites and smashing the weaving machines. Like that's just because people are like, you're just not going to have a job anymore. But I think because at least the promises that AI is making, they do promise to displace a lot of people. Like Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, says the entire social fabric is going to have to be restructured. And we seem to have no answer for young people that are graduating into this economy and trying to move forward. And so then you get all sorts of political things that happen too, like people voting as a form of protest. And
Right.
it really becomes complicated when you don't provide answers. And there has to be some sort of retraining, some sort of way that we can take the skills that the students have developed and put them into jobs that are secure, at least for a couple of years, versus just leaving them on their own. I just don't think that's a possible answer.
Yeah. So, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and really just tackle this head on because it's a big issue, and I don't have the answers, Kyla. I'm not assuming you do either, but
No, not
you've
right
got
now.
your finger on the pulse of your generation here. So, before we turned on the recording, we were talking about Keynes's theory of technological displacement,
Right.
which I've mentioned on this channel before. So, probably many viewers have heard me talk about it, where he basically said, look, if technology can do a better job than a human, you should replace the human. But you have to be careful at the rate at which you displace that human labor. You need to throttle it so that you're diverting that human labor, displaced human labor, to another productive use. If you don't, if you displace too many people too quickly, you end up creating a social crisis, the cost of which is oftentimes larger than the economic benefit you got from adopting the new technology. And I think AI, right now at least, looks to be that on steroids. Like as you said, nobody really has a plan for this. The only answer that I've really heard from the people who are really driving the AI initiative is universal basic income, which honestly, I don't think works economically, but I just don't think it works culturally. I think to just basically tell an increasing percent of your populace that, oh, you just get to sit home, you just sit home and collect a check. It's corrosive. It's toxic to a person's self-worth, and there's just all sorts of social ills that come out of that. So I really don't think of that as any real type of solution here. So the question becomes, if and as AI does start killing jobs, where will people get their purpose from, and how will they be able to contribute to the economy? We're only going to need so many, robot maintenance people. Where does that go? And I know you don't have the answer to that, but I just got to imagine that that hangs heavy over your generation, even if they don't think about it maybe as actively as you and I do subconsciously. I think they've got to be picking up
Sure.
on the fact here that just the system feels like it's working against us, not for us.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's what you see in these trust metrics. Like the number of people that think that the things are headed in the right direction is 15%, I believe. And when you have numbers like that, like it's just very difficult to pass any sort of policy that works for people. And so, in terms of what we do in the meantime, some companies are hiring people to essentially attend to the AI. So, Quora, I think it's said, they're essentially an answer to response website where people will ask a question and people respond. And the CEO of Quora is hiring a person to like make sure that the AI is not overtaking the website. And so I think there will be jobs like that, like almost AI cleanup jobs where we're like making sure that the robots are doing okay. And as you
Right.
said, robot maintenance. I'm not sure if that'll provide some sort of purpose. And when you hear
Well,
a
and how
lot
many of
of,
those jobs are there too? I mean, those are high
right,
scale jobs, right? And to a certain
yeah,
extent too, with the AI, it's like the old like train your replacement, oh, we're
yeah,
going to hire this person if you can train him and then we're going to fire you type of deal. Like
yeah.
once you make the AI better, well, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of tech optimists will say, and this is a theory I subscribe to just out of optimism and hope, is that we'll find new jobs. Like new jobs will be created just like it was post-internet, and what
Yeah.
those jobs will be, who knows? Like we probably can't even imagine it at this point. So we just have to be hopeful that the AI will create some sort of new jobs. And I think oftentimes we forget like there is a physical world that has to be maintained outside of the internet universe. So perhaps it'll be more investment in those sorts of things versus a lot of digital investment, which has
Yeah.
been essentially propping up the stock market.
Well, there is room for optimism on this. So I don't want to, again, just sell pessimism here. And I'm wondering, Kyla, does anybody in the younger generation, are they is what the new administration is saying resonating with them at all in terms of, look, we're reshoring American jobs, right? So we want to create more jobs here. We are going to be investing in America. We're going to be, rebuilding our entire electrical grid. We're going to be going nuclear. We're going to be drill, baby, drill out in the oil fields. So to your point, there may actually be a lot more sort of shovel-ready type jobs, right? Where again, it's not necessarily sitting at a computer. A lot of the things that maybe your generation is even more acclimatized to than mine in terms of just living in a digital world. Um, does that excite them? Do they feel like, oh, okay, here's somebody that's actually looking out for me and trying to create, a future I can step into?
So the reason that a lot of people voted for Trump, the young people, was because they wanted him to fix the economy.
Hmm.
We did see huge swings, specifically in like the 18 to 24-year-olds toward Trump. In the polling data, he's dipped quite a bit in terms of sentiment. So I'm not sure if they're
Since
like
the
it's
election, you mean?
right.
Okay.
And so I think that has been not great. But in terms of the jobs that are promised in bringing manufacturing back to the United States, people are optimistic about that. I was at a bike factory in Chattanooga about 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about something that was quite interesting because they build their bikes in the United States as Lightspeed, great bikes. And they were talking about it's like fine to bring American manufacturing back, and they're very excited about that. But like part of the problem is bringing raw materials back. So like
Hmm.
you have to have titanium in the US. Like you have to be able to build these sort of carbon fiber, like all of these parts and materials that come in from overseas. There has to be incentives to have those produced in the US too. And so I think that's what a lot of people are talking about in terms of bringing manufacturing back. It has to be the entire supply chain rather than just putting things together. But definitely people are quite optimistic about the fact of returning American manufacturing.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And obviously, that's something that they can lean into and hopefully be a part of that movement and whatnot. And I want to contrast this with my observation. You may have a different one of the recent mayoral race results that just happened in New York City, right? Where basically a like full-blown democratic socialist promising all sorts of free benefits, including like, government stores and things, government grocery stores and things like that. Free, completely free public transit, rent control, all sorts of things. Just smoked, a longstanding establishment politician there in New York City. And one of the fears that I have had over the years, as I could see this issue brewing that we're talking about, was that the people who check out, right, who just lose total trust in the system, will politically say, you know what, I'm going to get screwed no matter what happens. So I'm just going to vote for the guy who's promising me free stuff, right? Um, was the election in New York, which a lot of young, educated folks voted for to get this Democratic Socialist elected, is that a reflection of that? And B, where do you see the majority of people's energy going? Is it towards the current administration? Hey, there's optimism. We got jobs coming back in. Let me really plug into that. Or is it more the like, no, everything sucks. Let me just get the guy who's going to give me free bennies in.
Mhm. So what's interesting about Mamdani in New York is that he is the most Trump-like candidate that's ever been produced by the left in terms of messaging style. So what Trump does really well is he goes on podcasts, like he's with the people, like he's out there
Yep.
and he talks about things that people are worried about. Like one of the main things that he ran on during his campaign was affordability. And that's what Mamdani did in New York as well, as was talking about affordability. And so it's kind of interesting because he has a similar playbook to Trump in a lot of ways, but very different policies. And many of his policies are unworkable, right? And so I think the reason that people voted for Mamdani in New York was because he was promising similar things in a Trump-like style. Like he was making these really cool videos that captured a lot of attention. He was walking the length of New York City. like increasingly politics is an attention game, and attention is a precursor to power now rather than a byproduct. And so
Hmm.
the politician that's able to capture the most attention is probably going to do the best. And that's what his opponent didn't do a great job at. Like he was running ads on TV, right? You need to be running ads on TikTok just to capture the mind share. And so that's my opinion outside of the policies, right, of what happened in New York. And then, yes, people did vote for him because it was a similar vote in the style of Trump. Like people voted for Trump because he was different. He was an outsider. He was making these big promises that people were really excited about. And it's the same thing just on the other side of the
Yeah,
table.
it's sort of like the more current version of the Bernie Sanders effect from several presidential elections ago, where that was where there was a period of time where both he and Trump were the two leading candidates in either party, and it really was an anti-establishment vote,
Right.
which was kind of like
Exactly.
just anybody but the folks we're used to type of deal,
Yeah.
right? Um, yeah, my personal bias is his policies are unworkable. And that's your word. Sounds like maybe you feel the same. But my fear is that the general public doesn't necessarily, especially the younger public that maybe has lived through less, economic cycles, maybe isn't really thinking about that, and they're just getting caught up in the fact that, hey, this is a charismatic dark horse, and I want to throw my lot
Attention
behind it.
economy. Right.
Yeah, and you may just have to learn the hard way, right? So this thing about the attention economy, you just mentioned that word. So I read your recent writing on that, which was great.
Yes.
Um, and the question I have for you on that is, that makes sense to me, right? Or now who can garner the most media attention, then power stems from that, right? But media attention isn't reality, right? So, how concerned are you about this, where we enter the world of I'm going to say magical ideas, right? Where I can get everybody really like rallying behind my media platform because I've got some concept that really resonates with them and they love. Doesn't mean I have the answer, right? It just means I have a lot of people who are emotionally ginned up around whatever I'm trying to get them excited about. But then I have to deliver, right?
Hmm.
So I get that power comes out of attention, but is it sustainable power, or is that lost if you can't deliver upon the promise of the attention?
We're about to see. I mean, I think a lot of stuff that's happened over the past 6 months has been pretty noticeable in terms of the power of the attention economy. And I think now, like, people are just very aware of like you have to have attention before you can do anything else. And they're forgetting that there is a reality that you have to deliver upon, like after you gather all of this attention. And a primary example to me is this company called Cluely. Have you heard of them?
No.
Okay, so they're a startup and they raised $15 million from A16Z, and their slogan is cheat on everything. And so basically, they're making an AI product that's eyeglasses, I believe, where you can like see answers. Like if you're on a date, you can like scan that person and figure out everything about them and then like woo them perfectly on that date.
Yeah.
And they have these wild ads that have garnered a ton of attention. And I think it's the primary reason that A16Z, like this highly established venture capital firm, invested in them. But now Cluey has to deliver on this product that promises that you can cheat on everything. And will they actually do that? I'm not sure, but they've garnered enough attention that they're going to have to. Or the other thing is people just move on. Like the memory of a person right now is a goldfish. People just move on to new things all of the time. There's always something new to look at. In terms of politics, I'm a bit concerned about the power of the attention economy just because like the media cycle has been pretty nonstop lately just because there's so much going on and that creates a lot of fatigue in people.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm not sure, but I do worry that people capture attention and then nothing happens and you get even lower societal trust because of that.
It's so interesting. You're kind of flipping these switches in me as an older person, of like, oh God, I was worried about that, and then she's validating these worries that I have.
Oh no.
No, no. Well, I'll expound in a moment here. But another big idea too that you're kind of making me realize here is we know the older generation that the world is changing and that the younger generations have a different way of doing things than we're accustomed to. And we know that one day your way will become the way the world works. It'll tip into the majority. I think we're a lot closer to that majority than maybe a lot of my cohort expects, and maybe we're already there, right? I mean, some of these things you're talking about on TikTok, I don't use TikTok. I've never seen them. I probably never will. I'm sure a lot of my viewers haven't seen them either and probably never
Yeah.
will. And it's this realization that, oh my gosh, so much of the way the world works is now happening in places that we just don't spend time, right?
Mm.
So that's really pretty interesting. Um, but to what you said there, a couple of things. In some ways, these are just old cycles. There's a saying that reality bats last, right? And
Mm.
we
I
can
like that.
think differently or whatever, but at the end of the day, reality is what it is, and we all have to bend around its will. And some of these are just human cycles that have happened in the past. So, for your example, that your story about that company, that reminds me a lot of just about. I live out here in Northern California. I've lived in the Bay Area now for I don't know, a couple decades, 30 years maybe. And I got, I feel like I saw from where Silicon Valley stopped being the engine of world-changing innovation and
Mm.
really became the hype factory for companies that would just get dumped on the rubes by Wall Street. So it was all about how can we assemble a team that can create some buzz around some product. We, the venture capital and angel investors, will make sure that our portfolio companies become early clients of that company to show really big initial sales growth. And then we'll hype it to Wall Street and they'll hype it to the retail investor and they'll IPO this thing. And whether it's ever going to make money, that's for those idiots to figure out.
Mm.
We got our money, we cashed out, right? So that kind of cycle has always gone along, and probably this attention economy is just that on steroids, right?
Mm.
What I do worry about is you probably saw the headlines from earlier this week. There was a recent research paper that came out about sort of heavy users of AI, and it basically said, hey, these people are like cognitively deteriorating, right?
Right.
As AI does more and more stuff for them, they are taxing their own neurons less and less. And I really fear that, this combination of some of these old pitfalls that humans have fallen into time and time again over the world history, added to the growing role of software in our lives, where maybe we just literally get, I don't want to say dumber and dumber, but we just think less and less. That feels like a really bad combination to me.
A Wall-E kind of feature. Have you seen
Kind of,
that
yeah,
movie?
or idiocracy, or yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because like, AI has been ruled favorably in the US. So like Meta and OpenAI, or no, Meta and Anthropic both won big lawsuits where the judge was like, yes, it's legal for them to buy millions of books and, not ask the authors, but then upload
Yep.
those books into their models, and that's fine. And it's interesting because China is actually now jailing people who were using AI on a copyright basis and not like legally getting it cleared.
Hmm.
So China is being much more protective around creative materials than the US is being. And so in the US, we're kind of almost like not incentivizing people to be creative and unique because you're worried that it's just going to get evaporated into an AI model. And then in terms of how people use it, like the number of people that use it in college is quite concerning too. There was a good Atlantic article about that a few months ago, how college students just can't read like they used to.
Hmm.
And so we are really eroding these fundamental skills. And again, it has to be like a policy type solution in order to really reestablish learning and brain functionality is something that's important. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of homegrown education startups who are trying to solve this problem, like making sure that people are maintaining that cognitive functionality. Um, but yeah, when there's no incentive to think, people are just not going to, right? Like human nature is pretty tough in that way. If there's no
Yeah.
incentive, people won't do it.
Yeah. I mean, evolutionarily, we're wired to be lazy because it
Yeah,
conserves our
right.
energy and calories, and right. And so it plays to the worst of our nature. Look, I really didn't mean to make this such a dark discussion here, and we'll get hopefully in a bit to where, some of the optimism lies here. Um, that being said, I do want to talk about two things. I want to just talk about some of the key insights from your new book. You mentioned you've been on the book tour. Why'd you write the book, and what are some of the key, top takeaways from the book you'd like to let folks know about, and we'll tell folks where they can go get the book. And then I am curious, Kyla, to more dig into kind of your craft and how you do what you do and engage these younger generations. But why don't we start with the book? The book is called "In This Economy?" Quotation or question mark. How money and markets really work. So, who'd you write the book for, and why'd you write it now, and what are some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, so the book came out about a year ago, and the goal with the book was to create an economic guide for people who wanted to have somewhere static to go rather than like use social media to understand the economy. And so it's illustrated with my illustrations. There's like 60 illustrations in there, and it walks through inflation, it walks through the Federal Reserve, it walks through fiscal policy, just basically all of the core things that you need to know about the economy. It definitely reads a bit more like a textbook. It's used as a textbook in some classrooms, and it's just a very basic guide to
Okay.
economics.
Did you
And
write it for high school, college students, or just anybody who is looking to make themselves more financially literate?
well, I'm sure you know, like it sometimes the level of knowledge of somebody who's about to retire about economics could be at the level of a high schooler. Like it
Hmm.
just we have not done a great job at serving people in economics education. So I wrote it for anybody who wants to understand the economy.
That is great. You you really surprised me in a very flattering way to say that when I reached out to you, your father had said, "Oh,
Yeah.
hey, I've watched Thoughtful Money. You should go in the program." Which again, please give your dad huge thanks for me
He's the
for
best,
doing
yeah.
that. But if he's listened to the channel at all, he's probably heard me get up on my soapbox and rail about how disastrously our education system fails us in teaching us financial literacy. And it's not just in your generation, Kyla. It's been going back for many, many decades. Um, and the thing that I just can never get my brain around is we as a culture value education, and rightly so. We think it is better to be educated than not educated, right? I'm 1,000% behind that. So when you ask somebody the question, okay, well, why do we care about education? Why would you want to go get educated, right? The answer is well, because I think I'll be better off in life if I get educated versus if I'm not, right? Which I agree. That's right. Okay. Well, what do you mean by better off? When asked that, most people say, well, I'm probably going to make more money. I'm probably going to be able to afford to do more of the things I want to do in life, right? So, okay, so a primary reason to get educated is to make more money, to be more financially successful. We don't teach money at all in our education system. I went through a good public high school system. Like I said, I went to Ivy League undergrad. I went to Stanford for my MBA. Nowhere in there was I given a single class about the basics of financial management, how money is made. I mean, you just talked about the Federal Reserve. No one talked about, hey, this is a mortgage. You're going to have to get one day. This is how you should go about getting one. I mean, just the practical stuff we don't teach, even though it is presumably the number one reason why people think that they should value education. It is just so crazy. So, anyways, kudos to you for taking the time to write this resource.
Yeah, yeah, it's what I try to do across all of my channels is do elements of economic education because I think if people are better informed, they're able to make better decisions, and then that compounds, and society is better off.
Hmm.
And
Exactly why I
so
created Thoughtful Money, by the way. So we're
yeah,
united on that mission.
exactly.
Yeah. But what's
Right.
interesting
It's
is
important.
so I have the benefit at this channel of so you're right. I mean, there are a lot of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, who in many cases have been successful in life. You know, they've actually made a good deal of money, but they don't have the financial experience and skills to feel like they're the right stewards of their financial wealth. They're worried that they're going to lose what they have by making a mistake, by making poorly informed decisions. And they're increasingly getting discouraged by the traditional financial media. As I say, they're just not finding it very financially nutritious, right?
Mhm.
So they're coming online to try to self-educate, right? And I benefit from a lot of that because like my channel, my platform speaks more their language and is talking to the topics that are on the forefront of their mind. But these are people who have assets to protect, and that's why they're coming online, and they kind of have to pay attention. You're talking to people who are much younger, who don't necessarily have assets yet. How are you getting them to care about things like the Federal Reserve or inflation or even appreciating compound interest if they're not benefiting from it yet in their lives?
I think they want to benefit from it. So, I mean, they might not be benefiting from it right now, but they
Hmm.
want to own a home one day. Like, they want to have some sort of retirement savings. And so they come to my channels to kind of understand what's going on and to figure out how they can, yeah, better make decisions. So I think that's serving a sort of similar role to you.
Okay,
And
interesting. So you're engaging them on the aspiration then, right? Like, hey, if you want to own your own house someday, you got to understand how the way this world works because the
yeah.
field is slanted against you right now. But if you do these things, you actually can overcome it.
Yeah, yeah, I don't give direct advice, but I try my best to guide.
Okay. And this is a conversation I was having the other day with one of my guests and really brought up your name because I was looking forward to asking you about this. He made the comment that like long form's dead. You know, Adam, what you do, you're going with the dinosaurs. This is the TikTok world. Everybody has, a 60-second attention span or less. And the future is all about short form. And I disagreed with him. And obviously I'm biased, right? Because this is the world I live in. But my general perspective is that I agree. I think increasingly short form is going to be the way to kind of grab people's attention, get the hook in there to make them realize, oh, I need to care about this thing. And at some point in time, the person graduates from, okay, I'm getting these little 60-second snippets to, I really want to understand this. And I'm going to need to have some medium that's going to give me the meat, not just the sizzle, but I need the actual steak here. And maybe that's not hour-long podcasts like mine, in the future. Maybe it's something happening in the virtual world or whatever, but it's going to be something that's more substantive than, say, a TikTok video. Um, First off, do you agree or do you have a different view of media going forward?
Yeah, the way that I think about the videos that I do on Instagram and TikTok is they're top of funnel. So if people want to learn more, they go to my Substack, they go read the book,
Okay.
and
And right, you
it's
have your
just
own longer form content yourself, the
yeah.
Substack posts, your book. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I used to have a podcast and YouTube, but those are on pause right now as I try to revamp them. But yeah, the goal is really just like you got to go where people are, and people do scroll. It's a form
Hmm.
of medicine, I think, for a lot of people. And if you can capture them and send them somewhere else, that's ultimately a good marketing strategy. So I think like TikTok and short form will be there, not TikTok maybe if it gets banned, but people are always going to crave something longer.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm going to go back to Lance and tell him, hey, Kyla
Yeah.
agrees with me. So how are you engaging these people? Like, give me an example of some of your more, popular, resonating clips. Like, what are the topics that get people, I'm guessing it's the Gen Z and millennial
Yeah,
ages
of
mostly.
course.
What gets them
Mhm.
engaged?
I mean, it depends. So right now, politics, because everybody wants to talk politics, and politics are
Okay.
increasingly informing the economy. So that's always interesting to talk about. But like I use all sorts of visual strategies. So I use a whiteboard in a lot of my videos to kind of
Okay.
draw out examples. I'll use a lot of pictures. I'll use a lot of metaphor, and use a lot of jokes almost.
Hmm.
I used to dress up as Jerome Powell and do these skits about the FOMC meeting. So yeah, and that captured a lot of people's attention because they had never seen anything quite like that before. And so it's really just trying out different styles and seeing what resonates and just keeping it iterative because you do have to play up against the algorithm.
Okay, and I'm curious then, how much of it is entertainment value versus educational value to bring people in? 50-50 more. It sounds like maybe you've dialed down the entertainment value a little bit, but I'm just taking that from the tone of what you said. I could be wrong.
I have recently. I've been much more serious, but I think it's pretty much 50-50. So you always have to have some sort of hook. I mean, you know
Yeah.
this, like it's just, you have to have something that makes people want to stay, and then you can sort of deliver the substance once you've given them enough reason to listen to you. Like you have
Hmm.
to justify taking up people's time. and it has to be both a combination of entertainment and education. And so I try to make it as funny as I can, and then I try to make it as informative as possible. And using short form video is useful because it's almost multimedia. Like you can have images on the screen, like text explaining additional things, and you can really make it quite dimensional if you do it correctly, and educational as well.
Okay. When you do a short form clip that you're trying to get to go viral or to resonate well, do you do that with the long form content that it connects to in mind at the start?
Mm, do I make short form videos about the long form or?
Yeah, in other words, like, okay, I'm putting this effort into the short term video because I want it to go big, but I want people who then watch the short form video to then graduate to this long form content. Do you tie the two together like that, or does the short form just live in the short form world only?
Yeah, I definitely tie them together. I'll mention my Substack quite a bit and reference back to old videos that I've done, reference to the book quite a bit too when I'm explaining, like, what the Fed is and their dual mandate and things like that. So I try to always point people somewhere, so that way if they want more information, they know where to find it.
Okay. So two reasons I'm asking these questions. One, as a content generator in this space, I'm fascinated. But also, a lot of my viewers have children and children who are in high school, college, or recently out, who I think they would love to have get more engaged in financial content like this. So, do you have any advice for those people who are saying, "Hey, how can I get my kid to start watching Kyla's channel, or how can I get them to just start engaging more with this type of content?" Would you have any advice for them?
I don't know. I got asked this question a few weeks ago at a conference, and I've actually been thinking about it quite a bit because I didn't have a great answer at the conference. I mean, I think it just depends on the level of interest of that person. Having some sort of stake in the game always helps. Like if they can sort of visualize compound interest and be like, okay, I have $1,000, like I should understand the economy, I'm
Hmm.
a part of the economy. So it does boil down to incentives in that way. Like how can you sort of, do they need a job? Like should they understand the labor market? But I am not quite sure how to make people do something that they are resistant to. I haven't
Yeah.
quite found the answer.
I'm so interested to hear you say that because I get asked that question a lot too. And
Yeah.
just FYI, I am putting out more, both recently and coming up, sort of uh, introduction to personal finance for teens or
Great.
college students. Um, and you know, one of the hard answers there is like, look, we're going to try to make it as useful but digestible and engaging as possible. But if you've got a hostile participant, like you're just wasting their time and yours if you're trying to cram this down their throat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I was talking about last night in a webinar on this topic that I've done that actually seemed to resonate, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it, is um, as a parent, I stole this from somebody else, but it seemed to work pretty well for me as a parent, as I've got two daughters. And as they were growing up, like I'd go around, as we were driving around town, I couldn't do this too much because they'd start to glaze over, but I'd just point to a business and say, hey, how do you think that business makes its money? Right. And you do that enough and you kind of use the Socratic method, right? So it's a business they've seen their whole lives, right? A bagel shop. Okay. Well, I guess they got to sell their bagels. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, how do you think they make money selling bagels? Well, I guess they got to buy their ingredients for less than what they sell a bagel for, right? Oh, but then what they pay their labor for, right? And you begin to realize that the kids over time begin to realize there are different models to the economy. Oh, that's an advertising business. Oh, that business is a manufacturing business, or that's a services business. And it just starts making that more real to them. And they, hopefully over time as they grow, start thinking about, well, I wonder what business I might want to work for, or what business I might want to start myself, right? And it's ways to try to make it again more tangible and relevant to them. Is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, definitely. Like one way that I always talk about the importance of the economy is like if you drink coffee, that's a whole supply chain that's important to
Yeah.
understand the labor that goes behind it, how it's made, where the cups come from. So I try to use that as an example as much as possible. And in the book, I talk about like bananas and where bananas come from. So it definitely does come down to helping people see that the economy isn't something that's abstract, it's something that they live within. And then once people realize that, I feel like they're a bit more open to
A bit more
understanding
open.
a bit
Okay.
more. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, a zillion more questions for you, but I will be respectful of your time. Um, I mean, you do, in addition to just being an educator, and I believe you do pay attention to what's going on, in the markets and in the economy. So I'm just curious. There's a question that I'm known to ask a lot of my guests, and I guess I'll ask it to you now. Um, what's your current assessment of the economy and financial markets? Do you have a
I
strong
mean,
opinion or
I'm a
strong
bit
outlook?
worried. Yeah, I'm worried about the economy. Like some of the labor market data that we've been getting hasn't been looking so good. The Fed is frozen with rate cuts, and maybe they'll cut in July, as some governors have come out and said. But Jerome Powell seems pretty insistent not to, for reasons that are understandable with tariffs. And so we have a frozen Fed. We have a labor market that looks a bit concerning, and then the economy is wobbling in a lot of ways. And so I'm not too hopeful about that and a bit worried. And then the stock market seems entirely reliant on AI working.
Hmm.
And I think that combination is a bit unsettling,
Yeah, and you're too young to have lived through it, at least caring about it as an adult.
consciously. Yeah.
Um, but you can. I was just interviewing a guy who was making a lot of comparisons back to the dot-com
Mm.
uh, bubble, and basically he's saying he sees a lot of similarities in terms of uh, the internet ended up delivering on its promise, and even more so, I think. But the problem was, is we pulled all that future value into the present back during the dot-com bubble, where it just hadn't been earned yet, and it was going to take a decade and a half or more to really materialize. So it's the difference between price and value. We just had substantially overpriced assets at the time. And there seems to be, you can make an argument for a comparable happening right now in the stock market where we pulled so much of the future value of AI into the market, which is not good, similar to the dot-com bust. But what's also not good is that value is concentrated in a much thinner slice of the market this time around. And so if there's anything that compromises that, it doesn't just take down that complex, it can take down, the markets with it as well. So
Right.
anyways. Okay, well, look, I appreciate you sharing that. You talked about the weakness, the weakening that we're starting to see in some of the employment data. Um, I just want to make one observation that you might want to include in some of your videos to your audience there. Um, you probably know this, but if you look at the unemployment rate over time, the pattern is really clear. We have a recession, unemployment, has spiked. It then trends down, 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 down over the coming years. It plateaus, and then it starts ticking back up. And when it does, and almost every cycle in the past 30, 40 years you look at, it spikes and we go into another recession. It's a very recurring pattern. And
Mhm.
you can look at the data right now and say, it looks like we came way down, we plateaued, we're now starting to go back up. You've probably seen the continuing claims data this week that are continuing to sort of show momentum to the upside. Who knows what's going to happen from here? I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I'm just saying if you look at past patterns of history, this is kind of right where things really start kicking up. And I mention that because your generation hasn't really lived through a real recession yet, and they have very valid concerns and gripes about how this economy is treating them. COVID was definitely weird, and I'm not trying to diminish what happened there, but recession-wise, it was kind of a blink and you miss it, and there was all sorts of, you know, unprecedented, crazy stimulus reaction to that. But just kind of your garden variety recession where the economy is losing hundreds of thousands of jobs over the course of a couple of quarters. The jobs just dry up for a couple of quarters and it can last for half a year, a year and a half, or whatever. I don't think your generation has really experienced that yet. And I just think it could really catch them by surprise and kind of feel like they're getting kicked when they're down, right? Like,
Mm.
hey, we've got these complaints with the stock market at all-time highs and quote unquote, record low unemployment. I can tell you this, as valid as your complaints are about what's going on right now, it's going to suck way worse if we're in a traditional style recession.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what to do to prepare for that, I don't really know. Maybe you've got some ideas you can share with the kids. But it's something that I would, if indeed the unemployment data really starts taking off from here, you want to give people sort of a, hey, get in front of this, take some steps. Don't let this hit you, unawares, because it's going to be like a two by four coming to your head.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. Didn't mean to end it again on a negative note. Well, let me ask you this as we wrap up, Kyla. One, again, so appreciative that you came on, and so glad that there are people like you doing what you're doing out there in the world for the cohorts that you serve. Um, so I know from my surveys and my YouTube data and stuff like that, that two-thirds of my audience is 45 and older. But I do have people in their 20s and 30s, even a few teens that watch, and I love that and do all I can to help them. I'm going to guess your audience might be kind of flipped in that scale. Do you have anybody over 40 that watches you?
Yeah, definitely. I have a
Okay.
mix of people who read the newsletter primarily, but my primary audience is 25 to 35 or so, and then the next audience after that is the 35 to 45-year-olds.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of, I guess they call themselves geriatric millennials who
Okay. Yeah.
watch
Yeah. That is a term. Yeah.
TikTok and things like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, there's a lot of people who like to consume economics information.
Okay, well, good. Well, I'm glad for that. And I know you have at least one 60-year-old watcher because that's Lance Roberts, the guy I had the argument with
Oh,
about short form content.
okay.
Um, he and I do a weekly thing on this channel every week.
Oh,
And I'll
amazing.
definitely be talking about you in this coming week's one. Let me ask you this in closing, Kyla. What would you like the older generations to know that over that 45 and older cohort? What support or new behaviors do you think your generation would like to see from them as we all go on from here as a society?
Yeah, I was on a webinar this morning and I got asked a question sort of similar to this. And I think what has been tough for a lot of young people, based on what I've heard over the past year from both employers and employees, and what was tough for me is I basically graduated into the pandemic. So I was in office for a few months and then I lost all socialization skills in terms of
Jeez.
how to
Yeah.
be in a corporate place. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of older people like look at the mannerisms of the younger generation. They're like, they just don't know how to be in the workplace. And
Yeah.
they don't, they like literally don't. And I think it actually requires some like corporate training to understand how to socialize within those places more so than there used to be. And so I would just encourage people who might be frustrated by their younger employees to kind of think about how to embed them a bit more into the corporation and providing a bit more guidance and like how to be in those places.
All right. So to convert that initial frustration into some understanding and tolerance for what these kids had gone through and maybe lean into being more of a mentor and saying, hey,
Yeah, like this
let,
is
let,
how you
let, let me help you learn how this is done.
right, exactly. Yeah, that's just what I've been hearing, and that's like been the most the thing that's worked the most for the most people I've talked to about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's very wise. So, anyways, I can definitely get behind that. Kyla, such a pleasure. For folks, even though my folks might be a bit older, but for folks watching who would like to follow you and your work, where should they go?
Yeah, I do have a newsletter. It's kyla.substack.com. I have a book that was published by Penguin Random House, so it's anywhere books are sold. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, and yeah, that's at Kyla Scan everywhere.
Okay. So Kyla, I'll put that handle as well as the link to your Substack up on the screen here when I edit this. I'll put the links to everything you mentioned down in the description below this video so folks can get to all of those with one click. Um, it has been such a joy. If you don't mind, hang on just for 30 seconds. I'm going to do a little housekeeping and then I'm going to give you the last word. Folks, if you have enjoyed Kyla being on this channel as much as I have, please let her know that by hitting the like button and then clicking the subscribe button below. Kyla, feel free to share this with your audience. They may not have the assets that my audience does, But a big thing that I do on this channel is try to educate, arm people with useful information, but then try to make that information actionable wherever possible, right? Information in and of itself doesn't have value. It's the application of that information is where you create value. And so I have some financial advisors that come on this channel. They come on every week, and I have them on for two reasons. One, so that the audience can crawl in the mind of a good seasoned financial advisor and see how they react to what the markets are doing, and then reflect that in changes in their portfolio strategies and their asset allocations, things like that. Very much like just transparency into seeing how a great portfolio manager thinks. But more importantly, it's just to serve as a model, right? To say, look, this is what I think a good financial advisor looks like. And I think most people, yes, there are some people who are really good at DIY investing. And if you are, great, you should stick with that talent. But most people aren't. They don't have the experience. And honestly, they don't have the bandwidth, right? They have real lives. They've got families. They've got other things to focus on. Their talents are better suited focusing on things like earning their money. And therefore, those people should partner with a good professional financial advisor who can help them benefit from all the things that you talk about: compound interest, portfolio allocation, position sizing, portfolio rebalancing, tax loss harvesting, all that type of stuff. So anyways, I have these guys on here to say, hey, look, this is what I think a good financial advisor looks like. You can talk to them or find somebody who's better than them. I don't care who you work with. I just want to make sure you're working with a good one who can help get you on that path to first financial stability, but then financial success. So anyways, folks, if you are looking for some help in guiding your portfolio into this future that's lying ahead of us, which may have some of the twists and turns that Kyla and I have talked about here today, I highly recommend you do that. Again, working with a good professional financial advisor. If you've already got one, great, stick with them. But if you don't, consider scheduling a free consultation with one of the ones that Thoughtful Money endorses. To do that, just fill out the short form at thoughtfulmoney.com. Again, these consultations are totally free. There's no commitment to work with these firms. It's just a free public service they offer to help as many people as possible. So anyways, Kyla, thanks for hanging in there through that. I want to let you have the last word here. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that is near and dear to your heart or to the interests of the folks that you speak with that you would like this audience to know about?
No, I think we covered everything pretty well. Yeah, I think it was a great conversation.
All right. Well, look, again, I can't thank you enough for coming on, Kyla. It's been a real pleasure. The door is open here. Anytime you've got something that you would like us older folks to know, or anything that we can do for you, love to have you back on the program.
Thanks so much.
All right. And everybody else, thanks so much for watching.
Pretty obvious that you're going to have a Fed coin. I think it's going to go to gold. It's going to drive the price really, really high. And gold's going to be one of these things that has a lot of value and it's really hard to sell. And people say, well, how is that even possible? Let's do a hypothetical scenario here. What if we saw a gold price much higher, like 5,000, eventually 10,000? That might go higher. And what you're going to see later is the reason it's going higher is because people are starting to move into it to protect themselves. Slowly bought some silver. I got a lot of silver. So now silver's like over $40. I got to go find all the silver. I can't find it all. So, and I've tried to find it all, and I look forward to selling it at some point, not right away, but I do think that it's going to go up over 50, and then people might start paying attention at that point.
Gold prices might rise rapidly to $5,000 or $10,000 if the United States eventually introduces a Fed coin, a closed-loop digital currency system. However, because the gold is not part of the official system, selling it could result in high excise taxes. Some analysis points to silver breaking its decade-long resistance, and possibly moving to higher levels $50 or more if certain large investor flows occur. Tucker points out that long-term holders may still profit when prices rise beyond $50 and probably higher. Stablecoins are now subject to more stringent regulations, including backing, audits, and supervision, after the Genius Act was passed in the United States in July 2025. This increases their credibility as competitors in the digital payments system and may lead to a wider acceptance of digital currency systems modeled after central banks. Known for his opinions on gold, silver, and the future of money, E.B. Tucker is a Resource Company board member, author, and investor. He points out that a Fed coin, a digital currency based on a closed-loop blockchain and under central control, is ushering in a period of more stringent monetary regulation. Major asset manager Amundi has warned that, given its increasing use, stablecoin regulation may disrupt international payment flows and monetary sovereignty. Gold may rise to $5,000 or even $10,000 under such a regime as people race to buy it for protection, but because it is not part of the digital system, selling it could result in high taxes. As a sign of regulatory reform, Fed Governor Michelle Bowman has called on authorities to be less wary of new technologies and more proactive in regulating blockchain and cryptocurrency. E.B. Tucker believes this shift would make gold valuable but hard to trade. As we dive into the video, don't forget to hit the bell icon and subscribe so you don't miss any updates.
We're walking into this system where there's going to be increasing control. And right now you have a chance to play these hope things that are going on. And you should do that while understanding that you're pretty doomed. Well, what does that mean? All right, well, you look at this, all this metal here. I mean, gold has done even better, right? I mean, like at some point I just switched to buying only gold because you would need like an armored warehouse to keep all the silver in. But these are things that are going to run, and then at some point they're going to be untradeable. And the gold prices, call it like 25 trillion right now. That's if you take all the gold in the world and you put a price on it. That might go higher. And what you're going to see later is the reason it's going higher is because people are starting to move into it to protect themselves. Protect themselves from what? Well, it's pretty obvious that you're going to have a Fed coin. I wrote the term Fed coin in 2000, I think 15 or something. It was way too early. Okay, that's the other problem with writing books and reports. It's a huge mistake because people, it's nonfiction writing. You should really write fiction if you want to be a writer. It's much easier to hide behind that. But I put the term Fed coin out because there'll be a closed loop blockchain. And what's going to happen is there'll be no counterfeiting, there'll be no tax evasion, and there'll be nowhere to hide if you run afoul of the monetary regime. And what's that going to do to gold? Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you what I think it's going to do to gold is going to drive the price really, really high. And gold's going to be one of these things that has a lot of value and it's really hard to sell. And people say, well, how is that even possible? Let's do a hypothetical scenario here. What if we saw a gold price much higher, like 5,000, eventually 10,000? You might end up in a scenario where if you try to sell that gold, there's this massive excise tax, meaning the gold is sort of like outside of this blockchain system that we're in. Now, to be really clear, blockchain doesn't mean Bitcoin. Blockchain means that the Fed or some new version of the Fed would because you're going to expose the Fed for what it is and have a new, much worse Fed someday. And this would be like a closed loop blockchain. So what's interesting about Bitcoin is you have this like distributed ledger. So you would just have like one ledger, with FedCoin, and it would be like centrally controlled Watson computer that would monitor every single serial number on every single Fed coin as it moved around. It'd be infinitely controllable. And then if you tried to sell the gold, you would be bringing it back into the Fed coin system, which would expose you to whatever tax rate you want. I mean, there might be like this, okay, you could sell the gold for this period at a fixed price, bring it back into the system. Does this sound familiar? Do you remember when this happened in the 1930s? There's some eerie similarities, like a sort of like a modern day computerized FDR scenario. Okay. Yeah. And so I think when people start seeing this, they start seeing, wow, I mean, this is possible. Now, here's what blows my mind is that then they say, how can I profit from this? And I'm thinking, these capitalists, man, Lenin had it right. These capitalists will be like, they're going to hang me. Is there a way I can make some money off the rope? Do you get what I'm saying? It's like, first step is you just need to see things you just need to see the bigger picture. I mean, you don't have to go profiting from every sort of thing that's going to happen. But
E.B. Tucker emphasizes that the demand for FedCoin would be a response to attempts by individuals to conceal riches outside of the system, particularly in gold, rather than a result of an automatic tax deadline. Authorities may then impose severe penalties after providing a brief opportunity to legalize assets, much like FDR's gold policy but in digital form. This illustrates a larger reality. Society is fixated on money and frequently pursues it unbalancedly. The lesson is to embrace change as it comes, see the system as a game, and concentrate on living life to the fullest rather than fighting against it. Although silver trails behind gold, Tucker points out that long-term holders may still profit when prices rise beyond $40 and probably higher. Let's review the interview.
I think it's not preordained. I think the issue would happen as a reaction to people trying to avoid cooperating with FedCoin. That's what would trigger it. So it's not like they say, on this date, we're going to have this excise tax. I think if people begin hiding, trying to preserve and hide and operate outside of the FedCoin regime, then that's when you would say, okay, we have a window of opportunity for you to get legal with your gold. And if you don't get legal with your gold, you're going to be subject to like a 90% excise tax. And also like all these, different ways that you can be punished because you're naughty school children, with having your gold. We told you that's only for governments. It's only for, foreign governments, not you. Okay. So that's the type of messaging. Just see the messaging. Like I remember as a kid, when we learned about algebra, I was like, what's the point of algebra? And, my father was really smart. He was like, you got to learn how the equation works. And then you're going to see that lots of parts of life are the same equation. You'd be able to solve things in life. I didn't really know what that meant, but it turns out, he was right. So like you see that you kind of see this process. Like what's the equation of FDR? It's easy when you go back and look because everybody, that was around then as an adult is dead now. Maybe there's some people that are old that were kids then, but see the equation and forget about the emotion. And then you look at the modern scenario, the digital version of that, and you say, wow, okay, I see how people hiding in gold would make it harder for FedCoin to take effect and be a control mechanism. It's going to control your whole life, okay? So everybody in the US is obsessed with money. And they're obsessed with money, and they hoard money. If you notice, people, they don't have enough money. Even people that have a lot of money, they don't quite have enough. Like the Morgan Stanley guy that I use is like, you should not stop working. Because the Tucker letter is like something I do because I love it, right? So like that guy says you should be working more. Why should I be working? Well, you could have more money. Well, what would I do with more money? Eventually I'd do something I enjoy. It doesn't make any sense. People's thinking is broken. And so you have a society that's totally obsessed with profit. I'm not going to say it's greedy because I don't think greed is bad. I also don't think money is bad. It's just that people are out of balance and they do something compulsively. And so when you back up a little bit and you see that this is where things are headed, then your job becomes different. Your job becomes to live now, to keep playing the game, but to know that it's a game and to see where it's going and to not be afraid of that because there's no stopping where it's going. And the world definitely keeps going. And you can survive and thrive through change. 1935 is not when the world stopped. It got infinitely more exciting, and it's going to get more exciting from here. You got to go along with it. You got to flow with it, but you can have more fun when you see what's going on. And so I slowly bought some silver. I got a lot of silver. So now silver's like over $40. I got to go find all the silver. I can't find it all. So, and I've tried to find it all, and I look forward to selling it at some point, not right away, but I do think that it's going to go up over 50, and then people might start paying attention at that point. But silver is lagging way behind, and the silver people talk about it in this way that I don't understand. It's kind of like, when someone's getting like really excited in a different language or something. I don't know what they like about it because we're in this market where you have things like vault higher in price. And I'm like, here to $50 is like 20%. I mean, here to $100, it's like barely more than a double. And like, you can't even find all the stuff. I mean, it's like, I've got so many backyards to go dig around in. I don't know where all this stuff is, but it is fun to go out and find your stash because, I've been buying this stuff for ages. I mean, I just bought it because I think it was cool. That's what people don't understand. Most of the time, you buy something because it's going to go up, it goes down. You buy something because you think it's super interesting and it goes up, and I just think that to me, I'm at a place in life where I'm like, everybody, I'm just watching what you say and what you do, and then I'm making decisions based on what I see. And it seems to me like really easy to make money.
He contends that the true difficulty lies in adjusting to a future with more stringent financial regulations without losing sight of how to survive and prosper in it. Could the launch of FedCoin hasten the devaluation of the dollar as countries look for alternatives? Will silver continue to be a secondary hedge, or will it finally catch up to the momentum of gold? If you enjoy the content, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon for timely updates. We appreciate your support, and thank you for being with us.
The point is, we're seeing lots of silver that is being accumulated by the central banks. That's $2,225,790,000 worth of silver has come into COMEX. In the first week or so of the month, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, let's not forget about India, who's bought somewhere between 600 and 800 million ounces over the last 5 years. That's more than is on the COMEX and the LBMA combined. Most of the public has zero idea that there is a massive drive going on for gold and for silver. First week of September, you're seeing nearly $4 billion worth of metal stand for delivery. But this is what we've seen every single month. Now, we've always been an importer of silver, not always been, in fact, never, to my knowledge, been a net importer of gold. Both of them together signal a bigger move, a bigger trend.
Central banks are quietly stockpiling huge amounts of silver, with Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and India leading the charge. Saudi Arabia has made small but notable purchases of silver via ETFs recently, which may signal a shift in behavior. China has bought 21 metric tons of gold so far this year, 2025. It's part of their strategy to diversify away from the dollar and align reserve assets with their global status. The notion that BRICS and other developing nations are considering silver more seriously due to its dual uses is being more widely reported. India alone has accumulated 600 to 800 million ounces in the last 5 years, more than what COMEX and LBMA hold combined. The US, traditionally an importer of silver but never of gold, is now importing both, a clear sign of a much larger global trend toward physical accumulation of precious metals. Andy, the president and CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, highlights that what makes today's market different is the sheer scale of physical gold and silver being accumulated, not just by investors but by central banks, with Russia allocating it in its 2025 to 2027 budget and Saudi Arabia making ETF purchases. COMEX deliveries of gold and silver remain historically high, signaling strong demand for physical metal, while a weaker US dollar is further boosting gold and drawing silver into reserve diversification strategies. Analysts like Mike Maloney see silver poised for significant upside in a potential monetary reset, though claims of India's massive silver accumulation and extreme delivery spikes remain unverified. Experts also warn that paper metals may not provide true protection in a crisis, driving the push toward physical holdings. Andy believes the public, meanwhile, remains largely unaware of this massive shift toward physical metals. As we dive into the video, don't forget to hit the bell icon and subscribe so you don't miss any updates.
Well, I think that what differentiates this market from anything I've ever seen, Ivan, and I've been doing this now for almost 36 years, is the amount of physical demand that is being accumulated. Now, we've talked at length about the central banks that have been buying gold. We're seeing action with the central banks buying silver. Now, of course, it started with Russia saying they were going to add it to their stockpile. First time I've ever seen a government do that. And then it mitigated moved towards China. Talking to guys like Sean Kuhn from Dolly Varden, he says, look, Andy, the Chinese, who are the second largest producer in the world, they told David Morgan they're the first, by the way, but needless to say, they're massive producers. Sean says they're flying all around Latin America, in particular places like Peru, even all the way up to Mexico, and pulling metal out of the ground before it's even called silver. They're buying doré, they're buying concentrate. They're paying double what the West will do to disintermediate the whole market, sending it back to China for refining. So you have the first or second largest producer in the world finds it significant enough to fly around the world and buy doré and concentrate right out of the ground from the miners, directly from the miners, and then sending it back to do so under the cover of anonymity, so to speak. No one really knows how much they're buying or what they're getting, but Sean can validate that is indeed what is happening. You look at the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia. Disappointing as it may be that they bought huge amounts of SLV, maybe one of the worst products I've ever seen ever in my career, because just as a side note, the short position right now in SLV is 53.97 million shares, which
Wow.
is it's grotesque, it's ridiculous. And remember what the prospectus said, BlackRock said, there could come a time when there's not enough silver to cover those short positions, buyer beware. But the point is, we're seeing lots of silver that is being accumulated by the central banks. What is really different to me, as far as I'm concerned, is the amount of silver that is coming into the COMEX. And, last week I jotted down some numbers. In month to date in September, the number of contracts, and this was last week, I'm sure it's much more now, that stood for delivery was 10,599 contracts. Let's do the math real quick. 10,599 contracts times each contract weight being 5,000 ounces is 52,995,000 ounces. We'll multiply that, let's just call it by 42. That's $2,225,790,000 worth of silver has come into COMEX in the first week or so of the month. And this is what we've seen over and over and over again. The point I want to get across here is that when you have countries, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, let's not forget about India, who's bought somewhere between 600 and 800 million ounces over the last 5 years. That's more than is on the COMEX and the LBMA combined. And now you see it happening in the United States. At this level, the people don't just have the most money that are standing for delivery. Now, when we say stand for delivery, mind you, this is going into COMEX. A lot of it leaves. A lot of it doesn't leave. So regardless if it's leaving COMEX or being put into an eligible account, not registered, meaning it's not available for sale, it's going into strong hands, to this degree, these people are not only the most well-funded traders on the planet, i.e. the central banks, the commercial banks, the very sophisticated traders that can stand for delivery on COMEX to the tune of billions of dollars every month since November, since the election, but they're also the most well-informed. And I think that's the most important thing to understand, is that the people at this level who swim in circles of 9-figure monthly acquisitions are not doing things just for kicks. They're doing it because they understand where we are going. They know the playbook. They are at the highest level of information. And that's what I take away from really where we're at this moment, is that price is relevant, but price is a tool of misdirection, allowing the big money to position before all of the people that you and I call friends outside of what we do for a living, talking about this stuff. The people who may be very smart, very bright, very well read, arguably just reading the wrong shit. And that's the problem. So most of the public has zero idea that there is a massive drive going on for gold and for silver in terms of delivery. Just as a side note, in the first 5 days or so, 6 days of the September contract, which is a non-delivery month, 3,626 gold contracts and 100 ounces apiece stood for delivery. So you're talking $1.5 billion there too.
Wow.
So in just the first week of September, you're seeing nearly $4 billion worth of metal stand for delivery. But this is what we've seen every single month. Now, we've always been an importer of silver, not always been, in fact, never, to my knowledge, been a net importer of gold. Both of them together signal a bigger move, a bigger trend, and that is that the smartest money in the world understands that there is a rush for physical acquisition of metal, bypassing the paper promises. So there you go. Crazy times, brother, and I think we're just beginning in silver.
Andy points out that central banks and BRICS sovereigns Russia, China, India, and Saudi Arabia are accelerating gold and silver accumulation, often buying ore and concentrates directly from miners, while the West relies more on paper vehicles like SLV. Russia confirmed BRICS talks on a new precious metals exchange with its own pricing, clearing, and auditing, reducing reliance on the Western system. While silver is gaining traction as a reserve asset, with reports of Russian buying and Saudi Arabia making first ETF-linked silver purchases. Analysts warn Western price suppression looks increasingly like misdirection, with BRICS building parallel commodity infrastructure to secure physical supply. Experts predict gold will remain strong, and silver could see outsized upside given its smaller market, though volatility and delivery bottlenecks may increase.
The only saving grace is, and maybe I would like to think they're not misinformed. See, if you and I bought SLV, we can never take possession. They can, because it's the amount that they purchased. You have to have a certain amount, and it's called a basket. If you are able to redeem a basket, which I don't know the exact amount, 20, 30, 40, $50 million worth, they can. So I'll give you an example. Kyle Bass, when he was running the fund for the Texas Teachers Union years ago, they bought, if I'm not mistaken, $1 billion worth of GLD. They stood for delivery. Saudi Arabia can do the same thing here. They do have the right to stand for delivery, and most of that metal, if I'm not mistaken, is held in the LBMA. So because they bought such a significant amount, they can stand for delivery. And maybe they had a reason behind doing that I'm not sure. For you and I, buying SLV is as dumb as a mud wall. Not only do you pay the capital gains for collectibles when you sell it, you can never take possession. It's custodied by JP Morgan and BlackRock. Of course, JP Morgan, as we have identified multiple times, paid the largest fine that the Justice Department had ever handed out at that point, $920 million or so, for manipulating the silver market. Well, and that was kind of, and the reason that I think that they got off so easily, I believe that this was done at the behest of the central bank, who gave them the green light to do this. And there are bigger reasons at play for holding down the monetary metals, but that's for another discussion. Simply to say, it was far more. In fact, you could argue that it was far, far, far more than just spooking. It was manipulation, and it was at one point thought it would be RICO charges, because in essence it's like the hitman kills someone, well, they can go after the mob boss because the mob boss ordered it. Well, the point of it is that who up the chain of JP Morgan understood this? Is it just the head trader, Michael Nowak, who was the sacrificial lamb that was put in jail for a couple of years? Or, I don't know. The point of it is that this is something that you can only manipulate a market, Ivan, for an extended period of time by pushing it in the direction that it is going. And I've been doing this for almost 36 years. Most of the time, the world didn't want gold and silver. They wanted U.S. bonds and U.S. stocks and real estate. They wanted what was, when things got scary, there was a rush to the dollar. What is happening now is that the big money around the world has become motivated, coordinated, and sophisticated, and they understand what's happening. The big money around the world largely being, when I say that, I'm talking the BRICS countries, in particular Russia, China, now Saudi Arabia, India. All of these countries understand, and they have been using the spoofing or the manipulation or the suppression of the metals market against us. In other words, hold the paper price down in the West, and then go all around the world and drain the supplies, especially off of exchanges around the globe that don't affect the price. The price is set in the West, so if you smash the price down on paper here and then buy it up there, and there, boy, that works out well. And they're smart enough to see the big picture. That's what they're doing. And then they go as far, and just ask yourself, the second largest producer of silver in the world, the largest producer of gold, don't sell an ounce. They fly all over the world and buy gold and silver in doré, which is a crudely refined bar, in concentrate, which is a byproduct of it, right from the miners, which completely disintermediates the amount and disintermediates the market and the commercial banks. They're thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. They're playing 3D chess, we're playing checkers. So I think that this is something that is being used against us without saying so. They get it. I'll evidence it this way. I've spent a lot of time talking about the BRICS, and the BRICS grain exchange is something that is under development. And I listened to an interview about the guy who's running it a year ago, and he said, we here in the BRICS produce and consume in the global South more wheat than they do in the West. Yet We have no control over its price because that is controlled on COMEX. But with the development of the BRICS grain exchange, that will change. Now,
Wow.
you know, they understand what we're doing with the precious metals, with the base metals. All of the things that we have suppressed for various reasons are now being used against us. It's jiu-jitsu. The premise being you use your opponent's leverage against them. And this is exactly what's happening right now, man.
Will central banks' increasing use of silver lead to a structural revaluation to that of gold? What potential effects may the establishment of a BRICS precious metals exchange have on shifting global pricing power and diminishing the importance of Western markets? If you enjoyed the content, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon for timely updates. We appreciate your support, and thank you for being with us.
I think silver is getting ready to explode. We did get as high as 39.5, I think, while I was on vacation. So we've got a little bit of a psychological barrier up there, you know, close to 40. But I think once we really clear $40 an ounce on silver, it's going to make a beeline for 50. And there may be, and there probably will be rather, a little resistance around 50 because that's a massive double top going back to 1980 and 2011. But once we take that out, I think it's going to explode higher. And I think we'll be headed towards $100 an ounce in silver. Of course, gold's going to be 4,000 by then, but that still means you get a better bang for your buck.
Silver is emerging as a potentially explosive investment, driven by persistent supply deficits, 118 million ounces expected in 2025, and booming industrial demand. Inventories have fallen sharply, while recycling is failing to keep pace, setting the stage for a strong rally. Experts suggest that silver may soon transition from an overlooked asset to a monetary insurgent. Analysts consistently expect silver to reach $40 to $50 soon, with many citing a strong technical and fundamental setup. But this is often realized over longer horizons or under extreme conditions. Peter Schiff noted that gold slipped by about 0.6 to 0.7% this week, as easing geopolitical tensions and expectations of Fed policy weighed on safe haven demand. Silver, however, held steady with slight gains. UBS highlighted that while gold has remained range-bound, mining stocks are outperforming. The Gold Miners ETF is up 15% in 3 months and over 40% year-to-date. This shows growing investor confidence, with major players buying dips and driving mining shares higher. Because of this, he argues that mining stocks remain undervalued compared to the value of gold itself. ETFs like GDX and GDXJ outperform gold, despite recent profits and fundamentals looking strong, while valuations lag. UBS calls select miners undervalued. Mining ETFs have delivered double the gains of traditional gold ETFs in 2025 alone, confirming the leverage upside available. With gold clearing $3,000, mining equities are rallying more sharply. Long-term tailwinds and macro support suggest room to run for the sector. For additional information, view the video. Please subscribe and like the material if you enjoy it to receive the latest updates.
You know, it was a pretty quiet week for the precious metals. Gold itself was actually down about 0.5%. I think it settled at around 3,336. Silver went the other direction. It actually rose a tad, up about 1/3%, and we closed the week above $38 an ounce. But from a technical perspective, I think the markets are set up for another explosive rally. And what really makes me optimistic now is the action that I am witnessing in the mining stocks. Because one of the problems with this rally for many, many years has been the failure of the mining stocks to confirm the continuous breakouts to new highs in gold and silver. And a lot of people who might have got into the market were discouraged by the lack of confirmation from the gold stocks because people think that gold stock investors, you know, are sophisticated and forward-looking. Because when you're buying stock in a gold company, you're buying into an earnings stream. And so what's more important than the price of gold today is the price of gold tomorrow or, years from tomorrow, because investors are looking into the future and they're discounting all that income into the present. And the problem was, as investors, particularly on Wall Street, watched the gold market rise, they really didn't understand why it was going up. And they just expected that, well, it's going to go down, that this is just a short-term thing. They found all sorts of reasons to attribute as to why the price of gold was going up. And so they just assumed that it was going to go down. And so they didn't want to buy gold stocks, because if you think the price of gold is going to go down in the future, well, that means the mining company profits are going to go down, especially with costs going up. It gets more expensive to mine gold every year. So if the price of gold doesn't go up, it's hard to maintain your earnings. And if the price of gold goes down in the face of rising costs, that's a double whammy. And so the investors were staying away from gold stocks because they were very suspicious of the rally. Well, looking at the action this week, and even in recent weeks, I'm starting to see investors gaining some confidence in this bull market, because I'm seeing days now where the price of gold is down quite a bit and these gold stocks are up. They used to get killed. I mean, every time gold went down, they got destroyed. And then gold would make a new high, but the stocks wouldn't make a new high because they got beat up so much on a small dip. But now, instead of being dragged up by the metal, gold stocks are starting to lead, with both the GDX and the GDXJ making 52-week highs on the week. In fact, the GDXJ, which made a new high after the GDX, made a new high this week and made a new high today on Friday. And both of those indexes are now up 65% on the year. That is a big move. Gold itself is only up about 25%. So finally, after years of lagging, they're now starting to outperform. And this is a bullish sign, because now we've got confidence in this bull market. Now, some people might say, well, isn't that a contrarian indicator now that people are buying these stocks? Not really, because this is sophisticated money. The public is not involved. And it's not like this is a mania, a blowout stage where you go to the supermarket and the cashiers are talking about the penny gold stock that they just bought. The public is not involved in this market. This is more sophisticated money finally moving in. And the way I noticed that is a lot of these gold stocks, when they report their earnings, recently, every time they reported earnings, even if they beat numbers, they killed the stocks. And if they missed numbers, they destroyed the stocks. Well, a lot of companies have come out with earnings over the last couple of weeks. Some of them beat, some of them have missed, but even the misses were great earnings because, compared to what they earned the prior year. But what I've noticed is every time these stocks get sold off, almost reflexively on these earnings, they bounce right back. It might not be the same day, maybe the next day, next 2 days, but they recover everything and move higher. So you have big money now that is buying the dips in these stocks. And this is just the beginning of a huge wave. In fact, that's why, if you remember back in April, I kind of angered some of my reps, my precious metal specialists over at Shift Gold, because I put out a special report from Europe Pacific Asset Management, and it was called The Best Way to Buy Gold. And I was saying, hey, don't buy gold right now. Buy gold stocks, because they were so cheap, and they're still cheap. Not as cheap as they were then, but still very cheap. I wasn't telling people not to buy gold. I was telling people to buy gold in the ground before it's dug up, because when you invest in a gold mining stock, you're buying the gold that's just still in the ground. When you go to Shift Gold, you're buying the gold that's already been mined and fabricated and made into a nice, pretty coin or a bar, right? And you're buying that. And what I was saying with that report is, you know what? Gold's over $3,000 an ounce, and look how cheap these mining stocks are. You got to buy these mining stocks right now. this is not the time to buy gold when these stocks are so cheap. And since I put out that report, the price of gold is only up by about 1%, but these gold stocks are up by more than 20%. Now, they were up quite a bit before I put out the report, but gold was going up a lot. And I thought it was ridiculous that gold made such a big move and the gold stocks were still so cheap. So now gold's kind of gone sideways for a few months, and the gold stocks have taken, the baton and run with it. And so I think this is, a marathon. I think we got a long way to go, but it's a very, very positive sign for the metals. And silver, too. I mean, silver has been demonstrating some relative strength. So I'm not telling people now, hey, don't buy any gold and silver. Everybody should still own some physical gold and silver. But I also think that more aggressive investors should buy these gold mining stocks because I think they're going to outperform now for many, many years. So if you really want to leverage up your portfolio, don't just own physical gold and silver.
The trend of countries moving away from the US dollar as a reserve currency is gathering pace in 2025. Central banks, especially in Southeast Asia and BRICS nations, are increasing their gold holdings and engaging in local currency trade settlements. In Q1 alone, central banks bought over 244 metric tons of gold, and gold ETFs attracted $30 billion in new investments. Bank of America reports that investors are heavily overweight emerging market equities, reaching levels not seen since February 2023. That's driven by a declining dollar, down nearly 10% this year. Simultaneously, investors are seeking refuge in gold mining companies. UBS and other analysts highlight that mining stocks are gaining traction as undervalued alternatives in the metals space. Experts are warning that aggressive political actions, such as pressure on the Federal Reserve and institutional interference, are eroding investor trust in U.S. assets. This erosion, combined with a massive fiscal deficit, could further erode the value of U.S. assets and encourage a shift away from the dollar. With dwindling confidence in treasuries and equities, gold has become a dominant haven. Citi analysts report that gold investment demand could exceed 110% of mine supply in the June quarter. With the dollar and treasuries now seeing reduced appeal, investors are reallocating into metals. Now, let's get back to the interview.
A long, long way to go because the dollar has a long way to fall. I think this trend is going to go hyperbolic. I think when we go back to QE the next time and the Fed starts cutting rates, the economic data that's been coming out, technically the market sentiment looks good, but the economic fundamentals of stagflation are very strong for gold, right? Because we got last week, we got the disappointing jobs data, which was so bad. Not only did we miss estimates, but they revised down the prior 2 months by the most in 50 years. We barely create any jobs. And if you remember, if you're a regular listener of my podcast, not the Friday market wrap, which, again, I'm going to keep doing this market wrap, but I also do my podcasts. And on the Fridays where the May and June jobs numbers came out, I specifically said these numbers are going to be revised down because everybody was celebrating that the numbers came out better than expected. And I said, this is BS. They're not going to end up being better than expected. They're going to get revised down to weaker than expected. And I was 100% right. That's exactly what happened. In fact, the revisions were even bigger than what I was expecting. But these numbers may not even be right. They may revise them down again, although who knows, because Donald Trump got so mad that the numbers were so bad that he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. He claimed the numbers were rigged to make him look bad. And now he's got a new guy, I think, but they may not even report the job numbers anymore for a while, right? Until they get it right. So maybe they need to fix it because I think Trump may be trying to hide the bad news from the public. See, Trump keeps talking about how the economy is booming. We have the hottest economy in the world. We don't. There is no economic boom. It's just a fantasy that Trump is trying to sell as reality. If you look at the budget deficit for July, the month of July, it increased by 20% over last July. It's the second biggest July deficit in the history of the country. The only July where we ran a bigger deficit was 2021 when we had all the COVID stimulus. Well, we don't even have that anymore. And we got the benefit of all the tariff revenue. Yet even with the tariffs, we still had the second biggest July deficit ever. Now, if we had a booming economy, we wouldn't have booming deficits. Booming economies reduce the deficits, right? Because the government doesn't have to spend as much on unemployment or welfare, and people are earning more money. They're paying more taxes. There's more jobs. There's more profits. And so the government is in better shape. The fact that the deficits are exploding is more proof that the economy is not. In fact, if you look at a lot of other economic data, the signs of stagflation are everywhere. In fact, this week, yesterday, we got the producer price index for July spiked up 0.9, way more than expected. Year-over-year number, much bigger than expected. I've been saying for a while, inflation has bottomed and is headed much higher. And now we're starting to see it in the data. Of course, we're going to see bigger and bigger prints in the months ahead as a lot of the tariffs really start to get factored in to these prices. And of course, businesses are going to end up raising prices by more than the tariffs. I mean, not only are they not going to absorb the tariffs, not only the consumer is going to pay more because as the prices go up, sales volumes go down. And so now businesses are forced to generate profits on lower sales. So how do they do that? Well, they need to increase their margins. So they have even higher prices and they try to make a profit with a smaller group of customers. But it's not just the tariffs and the need to, increase margins that are going to cause prices to go up. The dollar is very weak and is going to get a lot weaker. In fact, the dollar fell again this week. And even though we got a big bounce in the stock market, again, we had Newhoff, the phony reciprocal tariffs, was because he said the bond market was yippy. Well, I mean, it's still pretty yippy because it's about where it was back then. There hasn't been a recovery. And that's because there's real money in the bond market, right? Nobody is buying treasury bonds for, to speculate and get rich, right? It's not a meme stock. This is serious money that is selling U.S. treasuries. So the real money is getting out of dollars, getting out of treasuries, and getting into gold stocks, buying foreign stocks. That is what's going on. Foreign stocks are jamming. I have a foreign dividend payer fund that we also manage. I think it's up about 34, 35% on the year. The S&P, I don't even know if it's up 10%, 9%. I mean, foreign markets are, leaving the U.S. in the dust. Like the U.S. stock market is standing still now because money is being sucked out of the U.S. economy and it's being brought back into the rest of the world. And that trend is going to continue as the U.S. economy slips deeper into stagflation. We're going to have a weakening economy. We're going to have strengthening inflation. The government might try to hide the numbers from the public, but the reality is going to show up in the bond market, in the foreign exchange market, in the precious metals market. And so my advice continues to be get out of dollars before the dollar loses any more of its purchasing power. Convert your fiat into real money. Buy physical gold and silver.
The conditions for what may be one of the most explosive bull markets in decades are being created by the tightening supply of silver, soaring industrial demand, and growing investor attention. Gold has stabilized above $3,000. Mining stocks have also performed exceptionally well, suggesting that both miners and metals are well-positioned for long-term gains. Meanwhile, the global shift away from the dollar and toward tangible assets highlights why many people view gold and silver as essential stores of value in an unstable financial system, in addition to being considered investments. Will silver outperform gold in the upcoming bull cycle due to its distinct industrial role in solar and AI? Does this offer the most alluring entry point for aggressive investors today, given that mining stocks continue to be relatively cheap compared to metals? We would love to hear your opinions, so please leave a comment below. Please remember to subscribe for more material and give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. We appreciate you joining us on this adventure.